back. Welcome to the Norman Nick Show. I am Norman. With me today, I do have Tyronica Gibson, a good friend of mine. What I've known you for like almost 2 years now, two and a half
Yeah,
years.
yeah,
Yeah,
about
we
2 years. Yeah,
we haven't been able to connect as of lately because of our lives being hectic. But we started off on Facebook meeting in a parental rights forum as far as discussing about like co-parenting and parental rights. And you were, I believe, when we first started talking, you were putting together your podcast
yeah,
and doing something out of Cali. Do you want to go in and explain what it is that you do?
yeah. So I have my app, Parent Playground, which is focused on connecting parents and really just building on a relationship like you have with your child and letting parents be able to connect with other parents because there's really not a place, especially outside of like Facebook, to literally just only connect with parents and just have these activities for your kids to be able to do that. You're looking all over the place. So it's kind of like just a one space area for you and your child to connect, and you to find other parents who want to connect also with you by meeting up at events and things of that nature. So the podcast kind of spin off of that because I feel like parents, we also don't have like a really authentic space to express the real challenges of parenting. Like, of course, we love our children, but like, that stuff is stressful. So it's like I wanted to create a place where we can actually talk about like the the ugly side of parenting, the real side of parenting, to where we can all be honest about our journeys and be able to connect with other parents on a real, just foundational, authentic, honest level.
Yeah. Yeah, because on Facebook, a lot of people like to try to use your words against you, being
Hmm.
facetious, and try to, repost your stuff and reanimate, what you're trying to, the message you're trying to get across. And, so, last thing you need is your ex trying to use your words against you on recording.
Exactly. Yeah.
So with that being said, I did have a list of items to discuss with you in regards to co-parenting
Yeah.
and, parental rights education. Now, as far as your expertise, there's 10 topics that I really wanted to go over.
Hmm.
Um, and not to take up all of your time, but the first one I wanted to talk about was like legal framework.
Yeah.
So, what legal rights and responsibilities do co-parents have? And as far as like discussing the legal aspects of custody, visitation, and child support. So, in other words, what do you think, or how far do you think in co parenting, as far as like going to court? Well, even before court, I guess in the whole process of co parenting,
Hmm.
because until the kid is 18, how far do you think the responsibility should go as far as the responsibility of the co parent helping out, or, you know what I mean, as far as being the assistant parent as opposed to being the 50-50, you know what I mean, in that aspect.
So I feel like as far as like when it comes to like the legal aspect of it, um, because of my personal experience with it, like obviously sometimes it doesn't work out for you guys to be able to do it like on your own. So I do heavily believe in the legal aspect of it, only for like, you guys have something clear and black and white on paper for both parties. So that way, obviously we're human, so there are going to be moments where we may feel a way, and that makes sometimes influence your behavior or your judgment or your reaction to the other parent. So to kind of like help keep that from being a thing is like, I do believe, especially like after my experience of going through the court process, and even if it's not a thing like you guys like battling it out, but even if you guys just coming to a common ground of understanding and saying, hey, we're going to write this parenting plan together. Um, it's just unfortunate. I think a lot of fathers also don't realize the rights that they have, and they're on both sides. There is like abuse of power. So I think having everything in black and white, it just levels the playing field. So that way, if it is that moment where today I may be having a bad day and like I'm tripping, right? I may say or do something that may not be the best for the situation, but having everything in black and white kind of prevents that and puts everything like in a clear cut space.
So in other words, you're saying go back to the script as a safety net. So
Yeah.
if you expound on the court order, because you guys are both adults, and let's say
Mm-hmm.
you do get along, and at some point, because of pillow talking from the new boyfriend or new
Mm-hmm.
girlfriend, it kind of goes awry. You know what I mean, as far as the
Yeah.
parenting plan. You can just say, well, let's scratch this rabbit hole we're going down. Let's just stick to the basics and we'll go back to our original court ordered visitation. That way there's no hiccups and we can expound off of that. That's actually a really good point to make for parents if they can do that reset. That would save a
Yeah.
lot of toxic, back and forth.
It saves a lot of back and forth. And then you also have to think about, obviously, when you're no longer together in a relationship, your perspective and your feelings change for the individual, and depending on how high conflict the original relationship was, that plays a part. And then you have to think about, now then we're both going to be dating other people. They're going to have a involvement with not only our child, but having influence on how we're operating, because now the way that we're doing stuff and the way we're interacting with their co-parent does affect them in a sense. So, and sometimes them coming from the outside, there are some people who are very ill intentional, and then there are some people who are want to have the best intentions, but it's like, also, it's a place and a level for certain involvement levels. So it's kind of like, when you start getting that messiness, that's also where that black and white paper comes in. It's like, okay, today, like, this is just not going to be it, so let's just focus to what we originally agreed on. That way, and then if anything needs to be changed, we can all agree on the change that needs to happen moving forward.
That's fair enough. I found with my situation, my ex and her level of ego, her egoness, as
Hmm.
far as not being able to let the argument go and having to
Yeah.
get the last word, or or the not even the last word, but the last hoorah. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Whether you know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
usually something that has to affect my day, whether it's the last, I'm not going to do it on time, or I'm not going to, I'm just going to purposely do what I want to do, even though I said I'm going to do this, or
Yeah.
whatever. You know, but what I find helps me is, now that I'm more mature and having to deal with my level of toxicity and not being able to co-parent as effectively as we used to
Hmm.
before, there were other factors involved, is having an attorney on retainer. Like, she
Yeah.
knows, because of my status, that I can call an attorney like that, and I
Right.
can get representation right away for next to nothing. And I've proven that. So it helps me as far as my level of toxicity to actually have a attorney on retainer, where she knows that, you don't act right, you already know what's going to happen. There's going to be consequences. So instead of fighting, you know what I mean, just know that, kind of like nuclear weapons, just know
Hmm.
that we have an arms race, and that you don't want to put the nuclear weapons on the battlefield. So
Exactly.
we might as well just get along, and for the best sake of everybody.
And I do
So
appreciate your level of, like, admitting, like you said, my level of toxicity, because I think that happens a lot, and, like, and especially with, my situation. I know I'm a controller, so that was one thing I had to work through myself, because it's like, I always want to be in control, and I had to take a step back and realize, like, okay, where the control stop, and where is it, okay, this makes the most sense. So that
I
was.
think I think what helped me out more than anything else is the fact that I have two baby mamas, that,
Mhm.
my first one, my kids are all grown, they're all 18 with my
Right.
first one, but my second set, when we went to court, I learned from the first one, who got full custody. I paid child support for her, I missed out on a bunch of upbringing because of the toxic and her moving out of
Mhm.
state. But with the second one, I was able to take control of the reins and say, look, and cut off, and basically snip the timeline so she can make sure she stayed in a certain path.
Right.
So the advantage, kind of like that, I had, like with what you're saying, as far as like the level of toxicity and control, um, as a co-parent with the first relationship and not being the primary custodial parent, I
Hmm.
was forced to take the back seat and grind my teeth, and and be unhappy with the situation. But at the same time, now that I am on the opposite end, it's hard dealing with her, because she's used to that stereotypical, the mother has full custody and the
Yeah.
father is the one that's this chasing. So I find myself with a lot of resentment with dealing with her,
Mhm.
because if she's not cooperating in any aspect of the court order, you know what I mean, I try to hold myself back from being, a Karen, and being like, you want me to work with you, but
Right.
where's you got to meet me halfway, because I'm full-time parenting here, you know what I mean? So Yeah, I see what you mean. But moving forward, the next one I wanted to discuss with you was communication and strategies.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you are an expert at this because you have your podcast and you obviously have a network and you have a release socially where you can get out your anxieties or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
for the average person, they don't have that. So, as far as communication strategies, how can co parents effectively communicate with each other despite personal differences? And what tools and techniques can they use to maintain respectful communication?
Texting, everything in writing, because when you're on the phone, obviously you can forget your thought, you can go on a tangent, emotions get involved, somebody says something, then now all of a sudden the conversation is a whole different topic than what we're supposed to be talking about at the beginning. So I'm very big on just, hey, we don't even need to be on the phone. We can just text. And like we have that literally in our parenting plan. Like the only time we are to call each other is for an actual like emergency, I need to talk to you right now situation. But other than that, everything is text. So tools, even if you need to use parenting apps, to keep track of certain stuff. For me, that wasn't a big deal of needing a parenting app, but it's still a part of our parenting plan, because of our situation. I ended up having to get a TPO order, and that is in there about texting only. So neither one of us can even tell the other person like, "Hey, the sky is green." Like that's that's out of bounds. So it's like if we can keep it strictly focused like on the child and only about the needs I need to get done, and then just not taking like shots about what the other parent is doing or not doing. And that was one thing that my main issue was, doing those shots. So that was my level of toxicity, because it's like you're not doing this. And my whole point of us going through the court process was to get him to do that joint thing, because it's like I wanted that for my child. Like you need to have that, but it's like, okay, I need you to step up. But again, the controller in me trying to tell you to do all this, it's not going to work. So let's just go this way, and that's safer. And it's like, let's just make this fair, especially for our child. So definitely keep the other side comments to yourself, because I can be kind of petty, and I know I'm very smart mouth. So it's just, hey, this is what's happening. And it's kind of like, don't write paragraphs. One lesson I learned: don't write paragraphs. If you got to write paragraphs, you're already going in the wrong direction. Just 2 or 3 sentences, say what needs to be said, keep it to the point, and move on.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that helps me too, as far as mine is, again, with my situation is realizing that we're not friends. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And they tell you in court, all the time, well, this is all about the kids, but when you go into court, minus the kids, they
Hmm.
put you against each other, and you
Yeah.
guys are literally fighting to see who is the best parent for for
Hmm.
the best option for the children. So in one aspect, they're like, okay, for these 2 hours in trial or whatever your situation is in mediation, let's hammer this out and find out what's going on. And then when we step out of here, despite whatever is said, you guys got to show face in front of those kids and not
Yeah.
blah blah blah. I think the trick is for probably 99% of the parents out there is how do you deal with your ex who is not about court decorum? You know what I mean? And sticking to the script of not
Mhm.
getting the children involved. And, especially in a lot of American situations, including my own, where the children year after year after year are seeing this, back and forth, and
Yep.
then trying to pull the reins back and say, all right, let's go to a parenting app. Let's regress, let's bring this back. And then trying to stay away from the past,
Mhm.
especially the negative part of the past where you're like, well, you did this 2 months ago and you said this. And it's like, well, we're in month October now.
Right. Like,
Do you want to relive? Do you want to relive, February, or do you want to, live in October? So,
right.
but it's
And
what
it
it
does
is.
affect the child, because it affected my daughter, because, her seeing like the back and forth. And then I think also, not just in communication with the co-parents, but also your communication about the parent around your child. Like you can think, like it's been several times where I think I'm speaking in private because I'm in my room, but my daughter's like, okay, I'm in the living room and like I still heard you. So now I
Do
have
the
to
thing. Yeah.
discuss this with her. So now it's to the point to where if I do feel like I need to say something, get something on my chest, and vent to like my friends or my mom or whatever, I literally go outside. Like, so there's no way that you can hear anything that I'm saying. And I want her to think that, hey, no matter what I personally feel about her father, I want her to believe moving forward that I have no issue. He's great. Like, love your dad. Like, that's my narrative when it comes to her. And just knowing we have to be very mindful as parents. Like, you you think your child is not listening, but if you're in the same 1,000 feet, it's a no-go. You need to go somewhere else.
I think on my end with the father's rights aspect, I try to tell the fathers it's kind of like holding cups of hot coffee in both
Mhm.
hands. You know what I mean? And you want to try to hold as much as you can because you need that caffeine to keep up your energy because you're a single parent or whatever it is that you're doing. And you're trying not to spill that coffee on the ground and hot coffee on yourself. At the same time, you're still trying to explain and move your, you know what I mean, and explain what's
Mhm.
going on. You know, people talk with their hands or stuff. So when I talk to fathers, I try to tell them when you're dealing with your ex, especially if you have to deal with them, let's say at a parent teacher conference or in
Mhm.
person or even on the phone and you're not doing the parenting app, try to picture yourself talking with coffee in your hands and how quickly you want to get away from her so you can focus on your task, which is getting the coffee to where you need to get it without spilling it. You know what I mean? Instead of her or him stopping you and saying, blah 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 drama. What about February? You know, or whatever. You know what I mean? And you're like, and you got coffee all over you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that visualization helps me as far as trying to curve the toxic back and forth, and doing the history, the history check on each other, which is very hard to do after a long time of back and forth.
Yeah. And that's one thing I learned. Like, it just focus on today, because at the end of the day, another thing I realized, I also tried to do positive reaffirmations, like, hey, you're doing a good job. That was great. I love that you did that. And because I figure, always, if I'm always saying something negative to this man, right? And because
Mhm.
of our past, it's never going to progress. And I'm always going to be that negative individual to him. So it's like, even if it comes to me just maybe saying something that I may not feel is 100% true, but it's like, I know it means a difference coming out of my mouth into his ears. So sometimes you have to play the game and be a bigger person, especially when your child is heavily affected by it. So,
And with that being said, that brings us into the next topic, which is the children's well-being.
mhm.
Um, how does co-parenting uh, impact the emotional and psychological well-being of children, and what role does stability and consistency play in their lives?
Listen, heavy. My child started experiencing depression, anxiety, to where it was to the point she couldn't go to school some days. We've both been in therapy since me and her father separated. And it's even been a time where I tried to do like family sessions. So, that didn't work out with his participation, which sucks. So it is a part of our parenting plan now. So it's like, yay, I get to make that happen. But me and my daughter, she has her sessions, I have my session individually, and then we have sessions together. Because what also we have to do as parents is, like, I think that we forget that our child is just as affected, if not more, than we are by the process. And they're looking at it from a place of, they can't control anything that's happening around them. They can't have any say so. Every move that's being made is by the decision of her two parents, who are seemingly acting crazy, right?
Hmm.
So I think, especially like in a Black community, if I that's why I preach like the therapy. I feel like that's needed. It shouldn't be taboo. It should be like a standard practice, because it does affect your child's you know emotionally and mentally, to where she wasn't even able to function in school properly. So that was a lot of work for us to get through. So luckily she's better today, but unfortunately it did cause some serious damage to her, to where my daughter's only 9 and she started her cycle at 8. And I felt like that stress kind of onset that. So it was a little bit embarrassing at first. And it still kind of is embarrassing, but also I know I have to live my truth, and I don't know who else may be going through or have experienced what I have, and understanding that, hey, I did this, and like this is my fault, and that's where it comes to the responsibility, because I literally have her childhood in my hand. So now I have to deal with those consequences of my action, and that's her life story now.
And you only have one child.
Yep. Yep.
So you when you guys are in negative or positive mode, you are hyper focused because you guys have a singular focus.
Exactly. And
So
then
it's all or nothing.
yeah. And then it sucks because she doesn't have any siblings. So she doesn't even have anybody in the same space to, oh, talk about our crazy parents. Like she's dealing with it by herself.
And that's funny that you should say that because I have three. I have
Mhm.
well, one's about to be 17 here in about an hour or a day and hours, a day and 4.5 hours or whatever. I have a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old,
Mhm.
and girl, boy, girl. So, and the boy, I find it very easy to get along with because we have a lot in common, being boys. Plus, I've come from divorced family too, so
Mhm.
I'm able to read and relate with him, and I think he copes a lot better because of our communication.
Mhm.
But like you said about the cycles and your daughter, I had to deal with those primarily on my own because of the
Mhm.
lack of communication between us and the toxicity. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that she has another set of kids with another man who is off the chain and, way
Right.
more toxic than is more toxic than she is. And because of that, it affects her not being able to co-parent, here. And so when we go to family court, it's not only seeing because now the 16-year-old is old enough, or the 17, about to be 17, is now
Mhm.
old enough to speak for herself to the judge, which she did. It heavily weighed on the decision. So
Right.
as far as consistency and making sure there's stability there, I think that was the main thing that, as predominant as me being a father and having full custody, I think that was the underlying trait that kept me in motion the whole time with the judges is like, look, these kids are always on honor roll with him. They've
Mhm.
never missed school. They don't miss their doctor's appointments. Anytime there's a earache or whatever, he's there at the school. He goes to all the parent teacher conferences. He
Yep.
does everything. And you weren't even paying child support. So
Right.
why do you think we're going to change anything and make it 50-50, or, anything that you want to do? And the reason I'm saying this is because last month I actually had to go to court against her, and she didn't get her modification, and she got smacked because I had to file contempt on her because of the child support. And now
Mhm.
she has to pay double because of the back child support. Now she has to double up on child support.
Yeah.
So not only does that look bad on her because now the kids know, you know what I mean? Because obviously everything's out in the open and they're old enough to see everything. And like you said, walls are paper thin,
Yep.
family talks,
Mhm.
especially family, grandmothers, they talk. You can't put a cap on a grandmother, you know what I mean?
You
She's going to say
cannot.
what she wants because she's old school. Oh, your mother's this, your mother's that. And it's like, Dad, did you hear what grandma said? And it's like, let me explain. She has a perspective. You're going to have that same perspective with your kids and their girlfriends and da 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 da. So,
Right. So I do
but
think like the stability part of it, because that was like one of my major things. Because when we worked together, I was still the primary caregiver. So I was in control of all the doctors, and I did all that stuff. Like, so I mean, separated is just like I felt like, okay, if I want to give you 50-50, like you have to step up. Like I'm always at, the school performances, the parent teacher conferences, the poem presentations. And it's like, I need you to participate in doing that same thing, to where even through our court process, at one point, I pointed out the fact that he didn't even know who her doctor was, who she had been going to, even when we were together. So it's like, these are things that you should know on a basic level, like about your child. So that was my whole thing. And stability is, again, as much as I want to control the situation, I'm like, okay, my our child has always had her own room. So when I moved
mhm.
to my place, she has her own room. That was a situation over there. So I'm like, her going back and forth. is like, okay, he wasn't as consistent as first. So we go to court. So I'm trying to get some consistency. Now we went to week on, week off. And it's like she's spending 1 week there, 1 week here. And it's like, okay, she needs to still have that thing. Like she needs to have her own space at your house. So that was another thing that I was fighting. But again, I can't force that out. I can't force that to happen. So hopefully that changes soon. But the child does need to have that consistency at both households. But unfortunately, she's not going to have the same living situation because we parallel parent. We don't co-parent. We parallel parent. So it's just you do this, I do that when you're here because we still haven't gotten to that place of great communication. It's just okay. We have this court order. We have our parenting plan. We're just gonna be very minimal.
Tolerant.
Yeah, on
Tolerant.
the words that we say
Yeah.
to each other.
Well, and that's funny you say that because I'm in the same boat with it with mine. It's like you want 50-50, but you every time we do pick up and drop off, you're hardly ever on time. And when
Yeah,
you are, the kids come out of the car and they have an attitude or are very unhappy about their visit for the weekend or whatever.
yeah,
So, and that's near, and that aspect of it, I really don't care about because that's her relationship. And I think that's probably where me and you probably differ because you're worried about, and not to take pop shots, but it seems like you're worried about the full aspect, whereas I'm only worried about my time. So if she fucks up on her time and she can't get it together, CPS is called, police are involved because of her boyfriend, whatever, and the kids are there, I'll deal with it, but I'm not going to worry about it, as far as them sleeping on the couch or if they're sharing a bed or whatever, whatever the case may be, because I know that wherever we're at, there's stability and consistency. And to me, that's all that matters because when they turn 18 or when they get older, when your daughter gets older and she starts talking about her life story, she's going to say, well, I know when I was with my mom, I always had my own room. When I was
hmm
with my dad, I was, sometimes I had a little brother, part time, sometimes I didn't, or whatever.
yeah, yeah. And you're right. I am worried about that whole aspect, and I deal with that mostly in therapy. And that's also because, when my child comes back, she is unloading. And now we have this agreement to where she's allowed to just come home and vent. And I don't say anything. Just, don't give my opinion, don't give my insight, don't give any advice. Just let her say what she needs to say. And then, okay, let's go get ice cream. So, and then we work on that in therapy. Also, one for our sake of our relationship, because she does need that. She does need that outlet. So, yeah, I do worry about it because I know that I can't control what happens when she's not with me. But again, I'm a controller, so I want to so bad. So it bothers me. And for anyone who's watching, yes, I'm in therapy. I will stay in therapy to keep it under control. That I'm not in control.
No, and that's a good aspect to recognize because a lot of women won't recognize. They'll only focus on strengths. They'll never focus on weaknesses.
Mhm.
Whereas men, we have to recognize our strengths, but we have to work around our weaknesses because there's usually nobody to back us up. Whereas a woman will have, a man or boyfriend or the state or family. With me, my mom's getting old, so I really can't rely on my mom, to watch the kids. And plus, they're older now, so I really don't need her to do that. But as far as like anybody, but I'm the backup. When
Yeah,
people have issues, they call me. I usually don't call people. They call
right,
me. Because and I'm not saying I'm the most responsible person in the world because I have a lot to work on as far as myself and,
right,
and what I'm doing. But I'm ahead of the game as far as a lot of other men that are in my league or, of my caliber. So
right,
I really don't try. It's kind of like YouTube. I really don't compete with my niche. I
mhm,
compete with myself.
right.
So I'm always trying to make sure that I do better than the last time or do better than last year. And that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
So, but moving forward, as far as conflict resolution, it's funny how these questions are rolling right into each other
Right
on the
into
topic
each
here.
other.
So, what are some of the common conflicts in co-parenting, and how can they be resolved? With the discussion of mediation, counseling, and other conflict resolution techniques. So, in your experience, what are some of the techniques or resolutions that you use as far as the conflicts that are common in co-parenting?
Um, Mediation for sure. I After my experience, I'm going to keep reiterating, going back to the point. I heavily believe in a court process and just having everything go through there and have it like black and white. That way, nobody's ego or whatever can get in the way. Um, how they can be resolved, you need to check yourself. And I had to do a lot of those moments where I start doing this. And I even had my friends tell me a couple of times, like, hey, like, you tripping. So it's like, okay, let me reel it back. So I think we need to be honest with ourselves as individuals and parents in the role that we play in the conflict resolution, the things that we do to either egg on or things we do to provoke. So if you can be honest with that and actually want to work on it and fix it, then you can end up being in a space that we're now in. Again, it's not perfect, but it's a whole hell of a lot better than what it was a year ago. And that's just based off of the limited communication. But mediation, I do believe in the counseling. So if you guys can, even if you guys don't agree on it, putting it in put it in writing, put in your parenting plan, because I asked the judge for that, because I do feel like a lot of our issues come from things that probably were unresolved from us breaking up and getting a divorce. And then, like you said, like that anger and the unresolved whatever. So yeah, mediation, counseling, go to court, conflict resolution techniques. Also, another thing I did to kind of keep myself, I actually changed his name on my phone, because when I would see his name, it would trigger me. So I actually changed his name in the phone, and I would change it and rotate it so it's like a new thing. So it's like, oh, like Conrad hit me up, or one day it was Damon, like just, and then also for my child's sake, because she sees my phone and she can read, so that way she doesn't even ever know like who's texting my phone. So for me, that
That's
worked.
pretty smart. That's
Yeah,
pretty smart. It's like the techniques that a cheating wife uses on the husband, but you just kind of flip it and use it on the
yeah, using it on
kid.
using it
Oh,
on.
I'm only saying that because I've seen that technique used before, obviously. But yeah, that's I'd never thought about that. But again, with my and different styles for different parents as a man in the same situation that you're in as a the primary custodial parent. My rules in my house are more standoffish, and there's lines
Mhm.
in the sand. And me and my kids were having this discussion the other day, whereas they were comparing the rules in the house as far as boundaries. And
Right.
then my kids were like, it's crazy because we go over to mom's house and her two kids that she has with with her new dude are just unruly because she's been through so much as far as like us and family court and
Mhm.
what can happen, that she lets the kids kind of do what they want because she's afraid to parent, because she doesn't want there to be a conflict where her and the dude who she has a toxic relationship with,
Right.
he's going to say something and have ammunition. So the kids kind of use them and go back and forth, and my kids come in the car and like you said, they detox or
Mhm.
depress as far as what they had to do with the pressure, and they just start talking. They're like, "Oh my God, my sister and brother, blah blah blah, did this, and then she ran to her dad and did this, and then mom and him started fighting, and he started packing up his stuff, and it's just like content for YouTube type shit. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's just like, oh my God. So, but yeah, as far as like what the point I'm getting at is like with my parenting style, there's like lines in the sand. So as
Yeah.
far as my phone is locked, and even if there was somebody texting me or whatever, I'm like you, I'll step outside if it gets too harsh, and
Right.
they don't need to hear it. But I'm a pretty direct individual, so if
Yeah.
I have to say something, it's going to be short and sweet, and if it's got
Yeah.
to be short and bitter, they're definitely going to know who I'm talking to, because it's no secret who I like and don't like. I'm not the type of person to fake the
Yeah.
funk.
Exactly.
So
That's how I am.
if they know that me and their mom are not getting along because of something, it's not something I could pretty much hide, other than me going outside and them not hearing the conversation.
Yeah.
But
So I
they're
think
gonna
that was
know
a big
that.
thing for me about the texting, because then she won't ever know if I'm communicating with her father. And again, the level of calmness we have now is by force, or my sense of court order. So it's like, again, this is still
Right.
new to me, and I still have to deal with, my feelings around it. And I realize my most important thing for me is, the time I don't have her, I can do what I can do for myself, and whatever. And like you said, like, because when she gets in the car, like your kid, she is unloading. I'm knowing all this stuff I do not want to know, and I'm just like, goodness. She's like, yeah, they're fighting, and I'm just like, okay. And again, that goes back to me, wanting to go in mama bear. Like, I'm ready to do whatever needs to get done, and just like, you can't do that, Tyronica. So that's where the therapy comes in heavily. I call my therapist, like, okay, Kelsey's telling me this, and she's like, well, you can't worry about that. And it's like, I am, help me. So yeah.
Well, and to be fair, because of the toxicity and how old my kids are, I've taught them to stand up for themselves too. So they're kind of conditioned as
Yeah.
A-type personalities. So even if my ex's current had the balls to try to even get out of pocket, you have three attack dogs that are going to back each other up. You know what I mean? And my kids don't play. They're little me's. So you know what I mean. So when they know they're right, and they'll be the voice for the voiceless every time.
Yeah.
They'll step up. Every time. So I don't have to worry about them bullying or choosing sides off of the wrong mode of integrity, because somebody
Right.
dangles a carrot with money. My kids are going to be like, what's that? You know what I mean? My we've been through this lesson with my dad.
Yeah.
You're going to dangle this carrot in front of me, and then the consequences are going to be more than what the carrot's worth.
Right. So I think
And they
that's
recognize that off top. So
right.
yeah.
And like, my daughter's only 9, so like she's learning this, and she does speak up for herself, but she does have like an issue with being able to communicate with her father. And like me and her relationship is like, we're very open. And I let her, even to the point where my mom is kind of concerned about, like, you let her say whatever. And it's like, well, no, I don't let her say whatever, but we also have to understand, when they're younger, she only has 9 years of experience of communicating. And then kids are not talking until they're 2, or like they're forming sentences and understanding her emotions. So it's like, I give her the space to say, mommy, you hurt my feelings. I'm upset. Let her go in her room, scream in your pillow, cry, whatever. And when you are ready to talk, because I think a lot of parents, especially I think in the Black household, because I was raised, like, it's shut up. Like, you don't get to have a say so. So with her, I let her have a say so, to the point to where one time she was calling for me out of the bathroom, and my mom is trying to address her, and she said, I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to my mommy. And so I saw my mom, my Black mom, like, about to get up and wring her neck, and I'm like, hold on, hold on, hold on. And so me and my mom had to have a good conversation, like, you heard it disrespectfully, but she actually said what she meant. She said, I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to my mom. And she wasn't saying it to be mean. She was letting you know what she wasn't doing. And
Yeah.
then she let you know what
Yeah.
she was trying to do. So
Yeah.
she's like, well, if
She
she
didn't
was
want to get you involved in an A and B conversation. She was being
right.
mature.
So it's like,
Yeah.
if you really just dissect and just listen to what she said, that was a true fact. She wasn't saying it to be, you heard it as disrespectful, when she literally let you know what she wasn't doing
And,
and what she
and
was
that's a nuance, that grandmothers don't really
trying.
grasp. My mother, who is white, is the same way. What I have an issue with on my side is my mother is more liberal with her
Yeah.
mouth. So when she talks about her past and living on a farm and her racist mother, she has no problem saying the racist words, that her
Right.
mother used to say. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And my kids are looking at me like, what is a stick? And I'm like, well, that's the what it, you know what I mean? It's an old. It's
Like,
like
you
being
know what
called
it
the N
does.
word to Mexicans. You know what I mean? It's like you have
Right.
to break it down. It's like, and don't ever say it ever, 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 ever.
Right.
So, but yeah. So my mom, like, un, unwillingly or unintentionally, like, teaches them old school stuff that should have been left in the past. And it's like,
Yeah.
whoa, this is the reason why we're reliving. Let's stop. Let's focus on what's going on now. Let's not talk about grandma or great grandma or whatever now it used to be. But moving forward, as far as parental involvement, since we
Mhm.
are kind of in that discussion mode, how can co-parents ensure both are actively involved in the child's life?
Mm-hmm.
as far as discussing the importance of shared discussion making or decision making and involvement in school, extracurricular activities, healthcare, etc.
All right. So with this, both co-parents can ensure they're both actively involved by their own behavior. So I can't force him to attend any more events than he can force me to do. So that is self-involved. And again, me being a controller, I had to learn shut up and stop throwing that in his face because he knows what he's not doing. So you just bring it up. Don't change the situation. All it does is just put the double face on you. And that's it. So that was one thing I had to learn. Um, Shared decision making, again, that's still very difficult for us. Everything, all our decision making is based off of the parenting plan. The judge did let us know that if I wanted Kelsey to do extracurricular activities, if he decided he didn't want to help pay for it, he didn't have to. So I'm like, okay. So that's also hard for me to put her in because we have a week on, week off schedule right now. So even if I was to learn something, she's missing a week off. So I was able to find a dance school where she was able to attend and they were going to work with the week on week schedule with me. Unfortunately, I just wasn't in a position to pay for it by myself. So I'm working on getting a position to be able to do that so she can, because I want her to be able to participate in those extracurricular activities. But that has to be something we both do because if she's spending a week with him away from me, he has to be willing and responsible to take her to those lessons. So right now, that's just where we're at with that. Same thing with the braces. I've been trying to get her to get the braces, and that's not something he wants to participate in. So I am learning to pick my battles. And it's like, you know what? If I just have to put extra money in and do what I can do on my end, then I'm just going to have to do that. So, more of the story is as a parent, whatever you want for your child, you're going to have to step up and make it happen if the other parent doesn't want that to happen. And just deal with it, to be honest, because you arguing back and forth about it is not going to change any of the situation.
I'm with you 100%. I was in the same boat as far as extracurricular. My son, little Norman, was in flag football when he was younger, and we
Mm-hmm.
had the week. It was when we were doing 50-50 week on, week off, and she was not trying to take him to his games. Actually, it wasn't even week on, week off. It was she had every other weekend, but he couldn't make it to his practices.
Right.
But part of being part of a team is that if you don't show up to practice, you don't get to play in the games. You know
Right.
what I mean? So that was the issue that we had, is that even though I was, kind of the assistant coach and, I was there for every practice, during the week and everything else, those every other weekends that he missed affected his game time when it came
Yep.
down to the finals and everything else. So he didn't get to participate and we didn't get the video footage that I wanted, because, all my guys, all the dads are all YouTubers for the most part, you know what I mean? So we're out there with cameras trying to get shots of our kids and stuff. And yeah, my son is sitting there on the sidelines cheering, you know what I mean? And it's just,
Yeah.
it was hard to deal with knowing. But I think the point I was getting at is that knowing how life is, because I'm not about participation trophies, I'm about,
Yeah.
competition and winning. So
Yeah.
part of the lessons, part of the lessons that I explained to him and my daughters is that you're not going to win. Not every podcast is going to be a bomb podcast and everybody's
Right.
going to jump on it. Just like every time you try to do something entrepreneurial, you're not going to succeed, especially as when you first start off. I don't care
Exactly.
how educated you are, you got to learn the lessons in life before you can actually be successful. You can't just game plan it out.
Right.
So when you're younger, you make these mistakes. And so what I showed him was that participation in a team setting is very important. And unfortunately, because of the situation, he wasn't able to participate. But this
Yeah.
showed him later on that this is why when I say I commit, I'm committed, because I know if I don't, this is the consequences. So with
Exactly.
that being said, him being 14 now, last year when he was in junior high, he was actually VP of his student council. He got,
Nice.
honor roll, he was the science award, you know what I mean? So he knows the importance of commitment and
Mhm.
teamwork. which will bleed on into his adult life when it comes to his, commitments to his spouse or whatever he decides to do.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I take those negatives and I try to flip it as lessons. Is
Yeah.
the point I was getting at. But as far as long distance co-parenting, I don't think either one of us have this issue. But for those that are listening on the rewind, um, how do you address challenges faced by co-parents living in different locations, and how do you maintain strong relationships with the child despite the distance?
So even though I haven't experienced this, the reason why we started going through the court process was because, when he would get upset, he would often say, I'm going to go back home. And, he's from St. Louis. I'm from LA. And at
Mhm.
this time, we're living in Nevada. So, of course, early on, I'm talking all this shit and just like, you know, if you go back, blah, 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 blah. And then I realized, you know, what? If he goes to St. Louis, I can go to Mississippi, live up under my mom and my grandfather. And, Kelsey has a lot of cousins out there. So I'm like, you know what? It's not a bad idea. So that's how we ended up going to court because I filed papers so that I can move to Mississippi and relocate with her. Um, at the end of the day, the judge ended up denying it because he did have to say under oath in court that he pretty much is not going to leave and go to St. Louis. So I'm like, okay, cool. So, because like I felt like you can't decide when you want to be a parent and when your expiration time is up. So the fact that you can even say that like on a whim, regardless if you really meant it or not, or to say it to like trigger me, the fact that you think that that's an option for you, you can decide when you want a parent, like that wasn't cool. And if that's the case, let me go be with a good support system where I can be a thriving single parent. And then I figured, hey, you go to St. Louis, I go to Mississippi, we're 8 hours away. And even to the point, it's like, okay, I'm thinking about Kelsey can get homeschooled at that point because obviously my money that I make here is going to go way longer living in Mississippi. So she can do homeschooling. And then her being homeschooled makes her even more flexible with her schedule. So now you can literally go see your dad whenever you want, or he can come see you, vice versa, whatever. So, because like even my family is still, cool with him because, my family comes from a lot of divorces, new wives, ex-wives, the baby mom is still in the picture here. So we're well versed on the blended situation. So it's like if he wants to come up there and see her, great. So I felt like I can come up with a great solution. I was at the point where I was willing, like, you can have every single one of her breaks because in Mississippi, the way the schooling is, they get a lot more breaks than they do here in Nevada. So I'm like, I'm willing because we can do a quick 3-day weekend. And obviously, she's living with me. So I have all the time. So I don't mind giving up spring breaks most of summer and all that stuff. So it
Well,
wasn't,
and when you're a secure parent, you don't mind having a break either. You know what I mean?
yeah,
I know when we went to court and the judge was like, she's gonna get the kids for, a week for, Christmas vacation or spring break or whatever. I'm like, for real?
like,
Thank
yeah,
you. You know what I mean? You mean to
yeah,
tell me child support ain't gonna change? All that is still the same, and she actually gets to keep the kids extra time? Thank you. But
right.
at this stage, they're all grown now, so it's actually a good thing. But yeah, when they were younger and there was issues with her living in and out of hotels and all that, then
Yeah,
I would have been like, whoa, he's not
yeah.
stable. The ex-boyfriend had just got out of prison, whatever, blah blah blah. So
So that's how I felt like long distance definitely could have worked even now. So it's just like, it's just about you come up with something and then it's like not me wanting to go to Mississippi so that I can keep her away. It's like, okay, I want to go there for the support, but you can have her as much as you want, like much as you want. Like I'm not attached because me and her are going to spend our time regardless. So I think you're right when it comes to the secureness of our relationship. And I think that got really strong, especially with us doing our family sessions with me and her. And that's why she's able to communicate with me so well. And then sometimes we save a lot of our conversation for a therapy session so that we can have that middle ground in making sure that something I say or she say doesn't come off wrong or misunderstood in a moment, and we can hash it out in that session.
that makes sense. You mentioned blended families. And I
Yeah.
think both of us really have a lot to discuss on this. But how does co-parenting work in blended families? Discussing the strategies and integrating step parents and step siblings into the co-parenting dynamic.
So I was raised like this. I have a lot of siblings, and there's like 10 of us. So in between, my dad, whatever, and like people don't even really know our family tree still because they don't. I think some people don't even realize that all of us just aren't blood and we all don't have the same parents, because I've never been like, oh, that's my stepsister, that's my stepbrother. It's just, that's my sister, that's my brother. So growing up, I watched my mom be very good when it comes to the co-parent situation with my dad. Like one of his girlfriends, they came over, they all sat in the living room and had a conversation about like expectations.
Mhm.
So I grew up with that healthy mindset. And then when I got older and my mom was able to be more honest with me about the situation, I saw that, which I appreciated, but I didn't realize a lot of the stuff in the background that was still going on, and like her trying to keep the situation, on a level head. And then mind you, my mom, she don't have the best level head. So that was actually kind of impressive. So blended family, I feel like it just comes down to respect of the parents. And then that's very hard when the actual parents don't have that respect, because naturally your partner is not going to respect the other co-parent, which was a situation I went through with his girlfriend. At one point I thought it was going to go great. We actually had a conversation on the phone one time. I'm like, okay, she has some sense. But then also I knew, well, she's with him, so she can't really have that much sense. So there's a disconnect. And then of course that came
But
out.
you realize, I chose him too, so there is a learning curve, so maybe she's
Yeah.
faster on the curve than I was. So let's talk. Yeah.
Right. So like, I'm given that learning curve. It's like, okay, like you don't know any better right now. And it even gets to a point to where at one time he was evading me and he used her to get to me, and she's coming to my house. She actually called the police on me, saying that I wasn't trying to get my child, like I was at home. And I really was even went at home, and I had to come home from where I was because I had just dropped my daughter off to him like a couple hours earlier. And I'm just like, take her back. She's supposed to be with her dad. And the fact that you're hitting me up on my phone is also alarming. So then I have the police calling me saying I need to come get my daughter. And I have to show them proof that I really wasn't home. So it's just like, that's where kind of like our thing is. So she
So
started to,
moral of the story is don't negotiate with a girlfriend, but do talk with the baby or try to discuss with the baby mamas. Is that what I'm hearing? The baby mamas seem like they have more to lose than the girlfriends do anyway.
I
So
mean, yeah. The moral of the story is, you when it comes to
pick your battles.
co-parenting, everyone has to have the respect, and you have to understand what I didn't understand in the moment is, as much as I wanted things to be cool with me and her, she's with my op, right? So she's
Hmm.
never going to be on my side no matter what she's trying to do. She's with the person who hates my guts, who wants to do whatever he
Pillow
can.
talks.
Right. So
Pillow
it's like,
talks with your
and
enemy.
without
Yeah.
pillow talking, and it's like there's no way you can like me and still be in a relationship with him. Like those two don't go together. So
And
I,
that's what I explained in my family court
yeah.
case. It was like the more that he's in the picture,
Mhm,
despite them and their issues and everything that is
mhm,
out in the open, and everybody knows, including the kids, know what's going on as far as their domestic violence and and everything, because it's all on paper. It's all been shown. Everybody
right.
knows. So why we keep playing this whole game back and forth, we know why she's in contempt of court is because he's in the picture, or
Mhm,
in your case, she's in the picture. You know what I mean? So in my, you can't make people. You can't. The only person you can control is yourself. And
yeah.
your kudos to your mom. Kudos to your mom for, as you say, normally unstable, was able to stabilize herself when it came to mixed company. But as far as my mom was the same way, as
Mhm,
far as like mixed family. My stepdad had kids that, two daughters that were outside of his, them. And so when they came to visit, they were treated just like, any other kids. But we
Exactly.
weren't, but it wasn't like your situation where we all kind of were interknitted together in the neighborhood one way or another. They
Right.
lived in California, we lived in Washington State, and plus we were
Yeah.
military. So, yeah, there was boundaries. But as far as blended families, I'd have to agree with you as far as civility and picking your battles, because you don't have to tell everybody your business, just like you don't
Mhm.
have to have a discussion with your ex's girlfriend or boyfriend. So I'm not in favor of flavor of the weeks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I mean, because I wanted that because, I see my mom do it. I'm like, and then even when I got with him, he had other kids. So I came to a situation like, oh, me and him about to have a kid. I'm like, I want to talk to your other baby mamas because like I felt at the end of the day, we all have a hand in raising this child and our other children, just like their kids were around me. And like, when I was living in St. Louis, when we were, together, I was getting his kids from school. So it's like, and I had a relationship and it's like, I pride myself on individual relationships. So my whole thing is you have to realize these other individuals are going to have a relationship with your child. So for me, in a perfect world, little naive, whatever, I feel like it should be a situation where we can still all be in the same room. There, events, birthday parties, whatever. But obviously, that's not going to always work out. But it should be that basic level of respect, and it shouldn't be a pitting of anyone against anyone. We all have our roles to play, and as long as we're not actively disrespecting the other individual, be it me, her, him, whatever, that should be the foundation.
got you. Well, to wrap that portion up, I think in my world, I just don't deal with drama. So if
Yeah.
your ex or your family or whatever is about that, even if I'm with somebody and their mom is off the hook, even with blended family or blended company, I'll just bow down or not bow down, bow out and
Yeah.
decide not to go. You know what I mean? Because I just don't do drama, and if I do, I squash it real quick. And
Yeah.
I'll be the one to leave the party. You know what I mean? Like, oh, we haven't even eaten dinner yet, and I'm like, I'm not hungry. I'm out.
Right.
I'll see you
Yeah.
guys next year. So
That's how I
moving
am.
forward, oh,
Oh,
go
one
ahead.
more thing, but that is how I am now because it was so much drama. So now I'm to the point to where we don't need to have a communicated relationship. Like you're just there and I'm here. Because at the end of the day, the only person who I need to deal with is her father. So it's kind of like, hey, just leave me alone. Just be nice to
And
me.
that's funny because that's how I feel about their mom. It's like now with our relationship and them being grown and it being so toxic for so long, it's like the only time we get along is like literally the amount of time of a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse. And that's about as long as we can
Right.
get along. You know what I mean? But
Right.
any other time, it's like either blah blah. It's just nasty. But that there's this one particular moments in time where we can just even right now, and it will be where a graduation or the kids will accomplish, and that would be the common factor. The moon and the
Right.
star, the moon and the sun coming together would be our children do something that both of us are in parallel with. And so that's the only time that we could truly get along. And then once that mood passes, we're back to February again, so
Yeah. Yeah.
so but as far as a parenting plan,
Hmm.
what should a comprehensive parenting plan include with the discussion of the importance of clarity in the schedules, holidays, and special occasions?
Woo.
That's a big
Everything.
one.
Yep. Everything you can think of. We need to have schedules, um, times, specifically what time we're going to meet up, where.
Claiming the kids on taxes.
Yep, and that's no longer like in ours. That used
Mm,
to be in ours, but that's no longer in ours because I claim her because I hold all of her medical insurance and all of that stuff.
gotcha.
So that wasn't included in. And that was the
I think
communication.
that I think that's what I'm gonna end up doing because I actually have to go back because she's in contempt again. So I'm
Hmm.
gonna have to go back and file again. I think that's what I'm gonna just ask for is because when I went in there last month to file for the child support being in contempt, I didn't know that the tax portion of child support was separately filed. So you
Mm-hmm.
can't go in. So that you'll go in there and establish child support, and they'll make the parenting plan, and they'll say, okay, you get them on the odd month or the odd years, you get them on the positive years as far as your taxes. But if one of them cheats and is in contempt of court, and she files for both years, like in my case, on
Mm-hmm.
purpose to be facetious,
Yep.
then I have to actually file separately. I can't just file under child support. It's actually under tax credit that I have to file,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a whole separate filing, which I
Yep.
didn't even know about. So now
Yeah.
I have to go back to court, and I feel kind of, in a way, I feel kind of bad because me being a paralegal, I'm in my element. You tell me I got to go to court, I'm just like, oh shit, I get to go talk to the clerk of court. Ew,
Right. Like,
cool.
okay.
The law library. You know what I mean? I'm like a big fucking nerd. So when I get down there, I'm like in my element, and I'm just like, what do I need? And I'm asking intelligent questions, and I'm trying to network, and and all this other. I'm like, check out my YouTube channel, type shit, because that's my element.
Right.
So I feel guilty because when I go there and I'm successful in court, she's now browbeaten. You know what I mean? She doesn't even want to pay. She doesn't want to talk to me. She doesn't want to pay child. She doesn't even want to do all this because she knew when she tried to come against the, when she did her when she did her Hawaiian moment,
Mm-hmm.
when she started World War II by attacking Pearl Harbor in my world, she woke the beast. And
Right.
so I was like, oh, you want to go to court and you want to go get an attorney? Oh, you want to do this? Well, let me go ahead and show you what I can do. And
Right.
that's when I went into the fourth year, and I was like, okay, no attorney. Let me show you how I start this LLC. And this was all in the last 6 months. I said, let me start this LLC. Let me do a background check on your attorney, which I found out he was an alcoholic based on a podcast that he did 10 months prior to us going to court. I exploited that. Then the attorney went to court and was like, can we stop him from making videos? And I was like, what do my videos have to do with the best interest of my kids? And
Right.
even the judge was like, I agree with Mr. Nix. What is your argument about him investigating or discrediting you, like you said, have to do with us being in court right now for this moment? I think that
Right.
is a separate issue you guys need to hash out or whatever. Long story short, the attorney hits me up right after we go to our pretrial conference. Is like, I don't know why you're attacking me. And I said, I'm attacking you because you are not in the best interest of my children. I don't dance with men in my ex's life because I know the type of men she has. And you are
Exactly.
an alcoholic drug user, just like her ex and everybody else. So as far as I'm concerned, you're the op. So I'm going to
Right.
continue doing what I'm doing. If you don't want me to do this, then stop representing her. So the next, and I said that in more words than one, but long
Right.
story short, I got an email not even 24 hours later from his paralegal saying I've stopped representing her. I took
Yeah.
down the videos.
Yeah.
I took down the videos immediately. I put them in membership mode so people can see them. People still have access to them because I get calls all the time like, "Oh, I just got Michael from my attorney, and there's something shady. How I just pulled up his name, and his name popped up on Google under your video. Well, how do I get rid of him?" And I'm just like, "You just tell him you don't want him to represent you no
Right.
more." It's just that
Yeah.
easy. But as far as getting on topic, as far as the parenting plan, I agree everything has to be
Mhm.
detailed out. And you know how they say there's no manual to parenting? There
This may be
is with a
it.
parenting plan.
Yeah.
That is your manual.
Even things,
So I agree.
even adding in, like, of course you have like holidays, okay, and then even on days when she didn't have school. So originally we didn't have any of that in our parenting plan because originally when we did started doing week on week off, we switched on Fridays. And of course some days, some months or whatever holidays, she may not have school on Friday, or on Thursday she's getting out early. So it's like, okay, there's no clear cut time when you're picking her up on Friday, because now you're just taking advantage of the fact that normally you would get her from Friday, but now I'm keeping her all day and you don't want to get her until the evening or whatever the case is. Even down to asking for vacation time, because that's how we ended up on the week on, week off schedule. Because at first it was split schedule. He had her Sunday through Wednesday, and I had her Wednesday evening through Sunday morning. So that was a problem because, I went to take her to Mississippi to visit her family, and he's like, you can't take her on my custody time. So I'm like, okay. And then obviously on me only having her 3 days out of that week, there's not enough time for me to plan a trip, especially if I'm getting her Wednesday night. I work Monday through Friday. So it was almost impossible. And if we went to take a weekend trip, that was always a battle because it's like you want to invoke your right to not want her to go to, if you drive to LA really quick for a weekend, but I can't do that because I need to be back Sunday morning for the custody exchange. So that's really where the week on, week off came. So I'm like, cool, I don't have to worry about that. I can just plan all my trips on my time. Then also when it comes to asking for vacation time, I'm asking the judge for a modification on that, because it's just like, okay, if I want to go do something for, like, if it's a certain day and it happens to fall on his time, I feel like it should be, hey, if I ask you in a certain amount of time ahead of time, assuming you haven't bought tickets or purchased anything for another event, that if I'm asking you, a month ahead of time, that it should be honored, and then like we make like an adjustment on that. So even things as far as like requesting vacation time, that all needs to be outlined in the parenting plan. Communication, what can be said, what can't be said, that all needs to be outlined. What should be paid for, what shouldn't be required to be paid for, even down to responses. We have it in our parenting plan that where you're supposed to respond to me within 48 hours, which he currently doesn't do. So it's like, I try not to be petty and like complain about everything. So, but it's also like, okay, we both need to participate in for this to make this work. So just like you want me to respond to you in a timely manner, like I will respect the same thing. So like the ego thing needs to just be out of there. So every time something goes wrong, instead of us fighting it out for months, okay, let's do a modification. Now we know we need to add this into the parenting plan until one day this situation can be better.
And
Or
hopefully the
yeah.
modifications don't happen like every other month, because you can only modify like once a year or once every 6 months.
No,
So
not
yeah.
here, not here in Nevada. So literally the modifications just come to like, it's more so like an adjustment. So like
Um,
I can just ask the judge like, hey, I want to adjust this. So it's not like a whole revamp. It's literally just, okay, this needs to be tweaked. So that,
gotcha.
because our schedule at first was Friday to Friday, and then 2 months ago it got switched to Wednesdays because of the me asking about, when she's out of school, on Thursday, or out of school on Friday, him picking and choosing when he wants to get her on that time because she's not getting her from school any longer. So the judge is like, okay, fine. Now you got to switch on Wednesdays. That way, her being out of school is never going to be a thing on a Wednesday. So that solved that problem. So everything in our parenting plan is designed for us to communicate as least as possible.
And that's actually a good thing in a toxic
Yeah,
relationship instead of
yeah.
trying to fight. Yeah, I feel the same way because it seems like I spent all this time trying to break up with you and get away from you. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Why am I fighting so hard for you to be in my life for the sake of the kids if you don't want to be?
Yeah.
So I think my whole aspect and the reason why I'm so successful too is because I never tried to force her to do anything that I needed to do on my own. You know what I mean? As far as like child support, which I knew she would get herself in trouble because of her character. You know what I mean? Because she's
Hmm.
a defiant, she's a rebel. You know what I mean? She's a
Yeah.
rebel at heart. So I knew that any restrictions that were going to put on her, she was going to find a way to try to work around it. And
Hmm.
me being a paralegal, I know that you can't work around a court order
Exactly.
unless unless there's some medical or by something having an act of God. But there's no way that your uterus is going to will anything to happen that a male judge told you to do just because you're the mother. You know what I mean? Just
Exactly.
because you have an instinct, you're going to be in contempt of court, and I've proven that. So as far as like us going back to court right now, like I said before, I kind of feel bad, but at the
Hmm.
same time, it's like just like a child, there's lessons that have to be learned because if I don't fight, you know what I mean, and choose my battles, and when I do battle, fight,
Yep.
you're going to put mistaking kindness for weakness, and you're going to keep not paying
Mhm.
child support, or you're going to keep fucking with the schedule or whatever to not
Yep.
co-parent it harder because you feel some type of way because of the breakup or whatever.
And that's how
But
I was. I kept trying to be like forgiving. And it's just like with this court case, it was like I knew from the very beginning two things was going to happen. Either he was going to give in and just give me primary custody and he's going to do whatever he's going to do, go to St. Louis, whatever. Or he was going to be forced to prove to the judge because he didn't want to give me primary custody mainly for the fact that he didn't want to pay child support. Understandable. That's fine. I didn't need that. What I was fighting for was for you to get her on a consistent schedule because that's what my paperwork literally said. I want him on a consistent schedule. If we're going to have joint custody, let's have a true joint custody. So with him not doing that, and it's like going through the court process, I literally got everything that I wanted. So him trying to fight me so hard on not getting primary custody, I literally got the joint custody, and now he has to stick to that schedule. And he's telling the judge he can do the schedule, but he's been telling me over and over again, I can't do week on, week off. And I'm like, okay, well then give me primary custody. And it was to the one point where he was trying to prove, because here in Nevada, joint custody can still be considered 60-40. So
Mm-hmm.
he was even trying to argue that point. And I'm like, the fact that you're even trying to argue that you only need to do 40% of the work as to why you still need to have joint custody, is like you're already not approaching this and thinking of this in the way it needs to be done. So now, as
The
soon as
best interest of the child. You're looking at the best interest of yourself.
right. So then once it got put into place, and him trying to fight me so hard, because I knew if I asked for primary custody, he was going to fight even harder for that joint. And now, mind you, it's again, this is chess, not checkers, because I know who I'm dealing with. So I know if I do that, you're going to fight to get what you've been telling me you didn't want. You didn't want to have a 50-50 joint custody. So now that I have that, and it's like as soon as she ordered it, he literally hit me up 2 weeks later. We need to switch back. I can't do this. I'm like, no, 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 no.
This is crazy. It sounds just like my issues. Like when we 2015, I went to court and asked for joint custody, and she was like, "No, no, no." I said 50-50. I don't want to pay child support. I don't want you to owe me anything. No,
Right.
no, 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 no. And so she, at first, she had no child support, but she had custodial parenting of the kids because they were so young, and she was taking them to school at the time or whatever, and we were fresh broken up or whatever, fresh in
Mhm.
court. So I was just like, and my dad, back in the day, my dad was really cool. We don't have the relationship now that we did back then, but
Mhm.
back then my dad was able to counsel, and he was like, look, don't worry about her. Don't worry about what she's talking about. Don't worry about what she says. Do you
Mhm.
focus on you? The more you focus on you, the more your success will be your revenge. You don't have to talk shit about her. She'll get herself in trouble. You don't have to stalk her. You don't have to prove anything.
Right.
All that's going to come out in the wash. All you
Yeah.
have to do is just be patient. And so I took that. That was probably the best advice that I ever heard and took
Yeah.
at face value and actually launched and worked with. And because of that, in my patience, it went from her having full custody to going to 50-50. And then even with 50-50, because of her lifestyle and needing to relive her high school years, she couldn't commit to nothing but
Nothing.
being able to be stable enough to be in hotels and with boyfriends, this, that, and the third. So her visits ended up forcibly becoming every other weekend because of her lifestyle. So
Yeah.
when we went to court, when we ended up going to court, we were already in that mode for like years where I had full custody, but it just wasn't on paper. So
Right.
when we went into court and her domestic violence issues came up, it was a no-brainer. It was like the kids are already stable. We're already doing it this way. The only
Right.
reason that we're here is because CPS told me to come here and put it on paper. That
Yeah.
way she couldn't come back later and say, "Oh, I want my kids back." And then
Right.
they're, in the midst of, some real domestic issues.
Yeah.
So long story short, it went from she had full custody to 50-50 to I had full custody to now she went and got HUD housing and is on welfare with her kids and all this other shit. And
Mhm.
now she wants 50-50 because she wants to see if she can get better housing,
Mhm.
plus not pay child support for,
Right.
better, more rooms in her HUD home or whatever, for a new home or whatever. And I was like, no, because even if you had some pipe dream of homeschooling the kids, you didn't even graduate school.
Mhm.
How are you going to educate kids when you have no degree yourself?
Right. So that's why all of this is just, I knew what was going to happen. And then I think for a second, like even my cousin, who was very supportive through the process, because she came with me to court. And when we got the ruling, and the judge like, I'm going to keep 50-50. She's like, how do you feel? I'm like, I feel great, because that's who I was fighting for the beginning. But I realized during the process, you if you want the stars, you need to shoot for the moon. So it's like, okay, let me ask for what I really don't want. Because I was scared as shit for the judge to say that I was going to get primary custody, because I'm like, I had gotten used to like my moments when I didn't have her. Like I started being able to balance like my personal life as an adult and be able to do stuff and plan stuff and actually go to concerts, go and like be an adult. And I'm like, okay, I enjoy when she's with her father because that gives me time for myself, my self-care, my mental health, especially because I had went through depression for a little bit. So it's like I needed that. So I was low-key really scared for her to say that, oh, you get primary custody, because then that meant that I only was going to have every other weekend to figure out, do I go hang out with my friends this weekend or do I do self-care this weekend, because I don't have that much free time. So it worked out great. It worked out great.
That's funny that you say self-care because that's the next question. So
How do I keep doing that?
as far as self-care for co-parents, and I think we kind of beat this up a little bit because we've already talked about counseling and,
Hmm.
co-ops and everything.
Yeah.
How can co-parents take care of their own well-being and while juggling parenting responsibilities with the discussion of a significance of self-care, managing stress, and seeking support?
Yep. Always therapy. So it's going to be two sides to this. So the one side is assuming that you do have joint custody. Um, Obviously, I have a full week to myself for me to do what I need to do. I go to the movies on Tuesday nights. So I have a lot of my fun during the week. And then like on the weekend, I'm able to have like the house in silence to myself. Now, if you're a parent where you have primary custody, this is where you are going to have to invest in a babysitter, childcare. If you have a support group, using them, play dates. So even you creating a network of like, hey, I'll take the kids this weekend, and you can have your mommy thing. So having that other mommy support, which I also had, and even how one of my good friends, her daughter in high school was keeping my child for me so that I can go and do adult things and pay her to babysit. So you have to find that balance. So either you have a longer time where you are sharing that responsibility with the other parent, take advantage of it and be responsible of it, be honest with yourself and know what you need. So I know the difference of me needing silent time to myself and when I need to get out and be amongst people. Um,
So, so your self-care is basically time management for your needs
mhm.
outside of your time away from your child.
Yeah, because that's very important, because I realized in the moments that I wasn't taking care of myself, my daughter even brought it up in therapy and told the therapist that she wanted me to spend more time with myself. And the fact that she called me out on she told me I do too much for her. And at first, that pissed me off because it's like, what do you mean I do too
My
much for
job.
you?
It's my
Yeah,
job. Yeah.
right. So I make sure like she does events like she calls me like the cool mom. Her friends gave me the official title back in December, which I'm very proud of, because like I don't mind like the kids coming over and us going to do stuff. So I take her friends out. We go to like the Barbie events or whatever. So I don't mind doing that. One, again, that goes back to my controller, because if I have my child with me with her friends, one, I can ear hustle because I also have a camera in her room. So it's like I can hear the conversations going on. I see who she's hanging out with. I see the type of character she's with and who she's calling her besties. So it's I take her out. I let her explore. We do staycation. So like I introduce her to um not just like a kid life, but like she gets to travel. So like she has her own suitcases. So she knows what that's like. She's not a sheltered kid. She's been traveling since she was 7 months old. So
Mhm.
I you need to balance. So when you don't take care of yourself, your kid is going to see it. And if your kid is like mine, they're going to call you out and say, Mommy, you're not taking care of yourself and you're doing too much. And I don't like the fact that she felt like she had to tell me that, because I think she kind of felt guilty that I was focusing so much energy on her when really I was trying to make sure she was okay. But also, my best friend had to check me. It's just like, you can't make up. Like, first of all, you already fucked up, right? With the toxic situation you were in with her dad. You can't make up for it.
So hold on. So so what I'm hearing is that your daughter's polite way to say you're being a helicopter mom. Hover back a little bit. Let me do this.
Yeah. So basically, she was just
Okay.
saying she felt like um, I she felt like I focused way too much on her instead of actually like taking care of myself, because she literally thought I didn't have a life, which I did. She just didn't know about it. But she thinks that I only live for her, not realizing that mommy does have her own life. So because I would hide it from her, because my mom, when I grew up, I've never seen my mom like go out. But when I got older, she did explain the time she did go out, which I didn't notice. So it's like, oh, so I had to tell my child, like, look it, don't worry about me. Like, mommy does have my own life. Like, don't don't worry. And then she was even concerned because her dad got into a relationship, and then she's like, well, you're not in a relationship. It's like, girl, you do not know what I do when you are not here. Like, don't worry about what you think my relationship is or is not.
That
So,
part.
right. So, but that was cool. I did
So,
appreciate her being
so
concerned.
with that being said, at what point? Because obviously there's milestones that your child has to go through, and she has
Mhm.
to see growth within you, so
Mhm.
she knows how to act as she
Yep.
gets closer to adulthood.
Yep.
So you think, and this is just hypothetical. Don't think I'm attacking or anything.
Yeah.
As a woman, as a mother, do you think that you not being in a relationship in front of her is
Mhm.
not showing her that it is safe to be in a relationship once you have a breakup? Or
Mhm.
is this showing her that or is she getting the impression that it's like one strike you're out, you have kids with somebody and there's no dating after that, you're no longer on the market, or you know what I mean? Or do
Yeah.
you date and show your kid like there's life after your father? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? The difference is that I just don't bring my life into the home. You know what I mean? I keep it separate until I feel you're mature enough to,
Yep.
you know what I mean, handle it. You know what I mean, type stuff. So
Yeah.
you actually are able to have that conversation.
Yeah, we actually did have that conversation because she really wanted to know. And at that time, when we talked about it, I was in a situation. So it's just like, I told her, I'm like, you don't have to worry about that because, and then, you know, it's just me and her in the house. So like we kind of have like a no pants rule. Like we rarely wear clothing like at home. So I'm like, before mommy brings somebody around you, I want to make sure that you're okay. And also, I'm like, when mommy brings someone around, I want to make sure that you can see somebody that treats mommy really nice and you know what a healthy relationship looks like. Because again, she's coming back and telling me how toxic her father's relationship is with his partner. So it's like, okay, yeah. And a part of me did not want to date for a while because I didn't want to accidentally get into another situation that wasn't the most ideal. So I did explain to her, I do have, I do have a relationship, but I have to be very careful about if we're gonna live with somebody. I'm like, me and you like living alone. And I started going through things that we like doing together, like just as girls and around the house. And I'm like, so if mommy was to have a man come live with us, you can't walk around the house in your panties anymore. Mommy's gonna have to wear pants. So it's like, I like the way that we live our life right now together. And she's like, yeah, you're right. And I was like, so don't worry, like I have love and companionship in my life. But just know it may be something you're not going to experience, for a while. I want to make sure that when
Got you.
you're okay. So
Got you.
yeah.
So no new dads or new boyfriends in the house until she's old enough to be able
Yeah.
to mentally handle it. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So
So I
as
feel
far
like
as
she
this,
could, but yeah, it's not a rush.
so as far as this last one, with the impact of co-parenting on society, this
Hmm.
kind of touches it because we were going to podcast yesterday in regards to, well, actually, I was trying to get you on the podcast because I wanted to get you your thoughts and feelings about Pedro. I can't remember his last name, but in Maryland, he killed his family court judge because the judge gave the wife like everything and the
Yeah.
house, everything. And you saw that. And so, as far as this next one, this kind of coincides with that, but the impact of co-parenting on society. What are your thoughts as far as the broad implications of the stressfulness of co-parenting on society, including reduced crime rates, improved educational outcomes for children, and stronger communities? What do you think that could be put in place, or what could be done?
I feel like, honestly, I feel like every judge to implement family therapy, um, with all co-parents. I think that should be a standard or requirement across the board. Because again, a lot of the stuff that happens is because someone's overly emotional or not mentally stable in that moment. Not saying that they have really big mental issues, but this stuff is tiring. And like even through my process for a year and a half, I did feel like I was going crazy for a second. So I think that is thing that should be put in place. I feel like it should be more measurements and hearing children, because I think the way the court is set up now, Kelsey wasn't able to speak for herself in court because again, she's only 9. But because of what she's experienced, you go through, and the way the world is now, children understand a lot more stuff at a younger age. So I believe she's very capable of going into the court and speaking up for herself and letting the judge know very clearly what it is she wants, what it is she doesn't want. Because of course she loves both of her
At
parents.
9 years old? You think at 9 years old?
Yes, yeah. You got to think about it.
Mm.
Right now, we're in a space to where, kids younger than her, like especially during COVID, we had 7 and 6 year olds committing suicide. So yeah,
Have,
like,
have you ever done the experiment? This was an experiment I think I saw that was on Facebook or
mhm,
TikTok, and it was coinciding with how the far right views like sexuality and children's
mhm,
rights to decide at an early age if they want to be a
mhm,
woman or a man or whatever, and their
right.
reasoning abilities. And in one of the videos, there was a guy who had like a little boy, I mean, a little blonde hair, blue eyed boy, and he couldn't have been more than like I don't know, 9 years old, 7, 9 years old, something like that. And so let's say he's 8. So the 8-year-old is sitting there at the table, and the guy puts this $10,000 racks in front of him, like stacks of money in front of him. I think they
Mhm,
were all $1 bills that were wrapped up. So he puts a $10,000 stack in front of him, and the kid's eyes get all wide and stuff like that. And the guy was like, "Hold on, wait, wait, wait." He was like, "Do you want the money or do you want what's in the bag?" And he lifts the bag up, and there's 2 Oreos on a fucking plate. And then he brings out a glass of milk, and he sets the glass of milk right next to the Oreos. And the kid immediately eyes are wide for the Oreos because it's can't, it's
right.
the sugar. So the dad's like, "Are you sure you want the Oreo?" Because the kid is like salivating over the Oreos. And he was like, "Are you sure
Mhm,
instead of the $10,000 you want the Oreos?" And the kid was like, "I want the Oreo, I want the Oreos." And he was like, "Are you sure? Because you can only have one. There ain't no eating the Oreos and then getting the
right.
money later." And then the caption or the thought is, how are we going to tell children or give the children the right to decide when they don't know what to decide for? That kid could have bought buku cookies for that 10K.
Okay, so this is the thing about that. Everybody holds different value systems. So just like we have the argument of like that stupid list that's going around with the women and her dating standards of where you take me out for a first date. So yeah, that may look like okay as a kid, yeah, like your rationale. You could have bought 10,000 more cookies, but in this moment, it's like, what does $10,000 mean to a little? I forgot what age you said, 9 year old, whatever. Because
Yeah.
in his world right now, that money doesn't have a relationship to him because he doesn't deal with money. He deals with actual items because us as his parents are giving him the items, not the money. So that's where it holds value for him is the item. That money doesn't mean anything to him at that moment. So that's where it comes from with Kelsey. We have to realize in their age, what is the value for them in that moment? Because it doesn't make sense for
So
that child to want money.
So coming back around to her being old enough to where you think she's old enough to make a decision about co-parenting at 9 years old,
Not
you
full
know,
on decisions. I just mean as far as having an opinion, because again, the whole reason why we're doing this is for the best interest of the child, right?
well,
So
but you got to understand if you're going to let her have an opinion, that's going to
mhm,
be weighed in on a decision.
yeah, for
So
sure.
you can't let her talk and then it not be weighed in. Either she has
Yeah.
to be there and sit there silent and be a quote unquote victim or enjoy the
Mhm,
ride, or she's a participate in where the journey's going. You can't
right.
have it one way or another. So the question I guess comes back around is in society as far as criminality and stuff like this, and this would go towards the children and co-parenting as far as bringing down crime, let's say our
Mhm,
children becoming criminals because they're stunted about the toxicity of our relationship or whatever, and they release that anger either in their own relationships or
mhm,
in society, because of what they see or can't have.
right.
Now, with what you just said, and I'm not trying to get into a paradox or anything like that,
Mhm.
but the reasoning that I had about this is because at 16 and a half, my daughter is barely intelligent enough to take a shower. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? And do the dishes, and you know what I mean? And I struggle with her to get good grades. So it was very hard for me to say, let her go to court and
Yeah.
have her be able to weigh her opinion because she didn't have a decision, but her
Right.
opinion was going to be said to the judge, and the judge was going to weigh on that opinion. Whereas the other two children who were younger didn't have the same aspect, or like you said, didn't have the same 16-year-old perspective. They have a
Mhm.
14-year-old perspective and a 12-year-old perspective.
Right.
So they may not seen it the same way, but my daughter was able to go in there and say, this is how I feel. And the
Mhm.
judge weighed in on her decision, which affected the other two kids also.
Mhm.
So when you having one child, I can understand it coming, but with me having multiple children to say the 16-year-old should be able to have a weigh in, the hierarchy of parental guidance is kind of like I look at it like a Jedi type thing where you have a master, Jedi, apprentice.
Mhm.
There's levels that you have to go to. And the argument that I have as far as, my inner dialogue with my even with my family is that there's a reason I'm the patriarch of my
Mhm.
castle. It's because I, just like Zeus, I look down on my demigods, my children, and I see them in their own realms and their own expertise. You know what I mean? I see,
Mhm.
Achilles doing his thing, and and Hercules doing his thing, and whatever, whatever. But they all have their strengths and weaknesses, and
Right.
I see the interaction amongst each other and how they interact in their own kingdoms, being school and everything else. So when I say that I want Hercules to only be able to speak at court, Hercules is only going to look at it through a jock's perspective. He's
Mhm.
not going to see it through the love of Medusa, or he's not going to see it through, or any of the other aspects or strengths of the other children. So that I have an issue when with children, whether good or bad on the toxic side of court, having a way in because their impression at 16, 14, 12, 9 is not going to be the same as 21, 25, 30 when they look back on this and you were now the bad guy because
Mhm.
they felt like you took away time away from what they feel they lost, you know what I mean, comparatively to their friends, you know what I mean, when they talk about their fathers.
Right. So I think that is the material difference, like you said, like because your 16-year-old, what she influenced had an effect on two other people versus Kelsey, like I said earlier, like she doesn't even have siblings that she's with, even though she does have siblings out in the world. She's raised as a single child because her siblings are in a whole different state who she doesn't get to spend time with. So for her, my importance was because I always have this thing where I'm afraid of, God forbid something happens to me sooner than later, and her being able to stand up for help and speak up for herself. And I'm also teaching her the lessons of the decisions you're making. And of course, we evolve. So she's seen me evolve. So it's also having that conversation like, it's okay who you are today. And that doesn't mean you have to stay who that person is. So, especially because the decision is affecting her in this moment, I feel like even if it comes like a yearly check-in with the judge and seeing, okay, do you still like the situation, her having a weigh in about us parents trying to decide what we think is best for her, because just like her telling me, hey mom, you do too much for me, when I'm literally thinking I'm giving her the best life ever, when I'm giving her hotel trips and flying her across the country, when really she just wants to go across the street to get damn ice cream. So her having that opinion and saying like, okay, this is what I need right now, because we have to think about what our children need in this space, because what Kelsey may have needed when we went into court a year ago, it's not what she's going to need next year. And during that
Right.
process, she did go through a change. She started her cycle. So that changed. So very well, I'm pretty sure what she needed has changed, what she's vocalized. So it's like, okay, well, eventually when you are ready, you will be put in a position to where you can speak up for yourself. But right now, I can only be your best advocate for you. But I I feel very strongly on her being able to voice what it is she feels like she needs, because we also have to understand as parents, again, like you said, you're coming from the hierarchy, you're at the top of the chain, right? You've been through, like, other stuff about her mother that she doesn't know, so you're making decisions from a whole different thing. when really, no matter how much I think he's a bad parent, to her, her only issue with him is, oh, I can't communicate with him, but it's a different relationship. So I can't put my foresight on her. So her opinion is very heavily relied on when it comes to me and my decisions, even down to when I was trying to, do the full custody and all that, and like asking her, like, do you want this? And that's why now she can come home and vent and say whatever she needs to say. And then I say, do you want me to do something about this? And she says no. So then ultimately I'm going to leave it alone. So this is why we have the dynamic we have now. You can come home, say what you need to say. You just need to vent. Mommy's not gonna do anything because you don't want me to do anything. You're okay with dealing with it with how it is. So until that changes and you decide you want to do something else, then let me know, and then we'll move how it needs to be moved accordingly. But yeah, at every age, I feel like the child should have a say so, because again, we may be thinking, yes, we are doing what's best for our child, but we keep forgetting they have emotions too. And yeah, her staying with her mom, like in your situation, it may not be the best situation at all. But if she says, look, I want to go stay in a hotel with my mom for a week, it's like, okay, I don't think that's the best, but like, okay, I'm gonna let you experience it so that way you can make a decision for yourself.
Yep. No, in that aspect, I agree because, like what I said with my kids, I let them, uh, unless they tell me, Dad, I don't want to go because I don't
Mhm.
feel safe, and it came like
Right.
that, then I would have to, say something. But I know my kids' personalities as far as their A-type personalities and them not taking bullshit from anybody.
Right.
At the same extreme, that same personality will also let them try to manipulate a situation to get the upper hand by
Mhm.
using that, that assertiveness. And so, where, like you said, as far as an opinion, my 12-year-old out of everyone has the biggest opinion of all of them and is the loudest as far as like the squeaky door gets the WD-40, you know what I mean? The squeaky,
Right.
the squeaky wheel gets the grease. She's the loudest, and she'll be the loudest over nothing. A prime example, um, um, there was one time where we were at my mom's house, and I think my mom was like talking to her at night or something like that, and I could hear them.
Mhm.
And she came out of the room in the middle of the night and was like, "Hey, Dad, Grandma, whoop, whoop, whoop." And I was like, "That was 2 hours ago. You guys are all asleep. What do you mean? Why are you coming out here dry snitching on Grandma?" You know what I mean?
Right.
But she would try to do that to manipulate a situation, which I'm already aware of,
Mhm.
and in our universe, as far as men, we call that like female bullshit, where the female try to like, let me see how I can manipulate the situation and see if I can get my dad wrapped around his finger, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Type stuff. But I'm immune to it now because like you said, I'm Zeus. I've seen this before on the mountain,
Right.
and I've been through a lot of relationships and a lot of dynamics. So when my youngest tries to come at me and say, I don't feel good or I don't feel like doing this, I'm looking at her and I'm like, okay, I'm looking at it 6:30 and it's your dish night. Of course you don't feel good.
Right.
Get the dishes done and let me know how you feel after that. You know what I mean? Or she'll be at school and like, oh, I have an earache, da, 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 this, that, and the third. And we're like, okay, what happened at school earlier in the day that got you upset or has got your stomach hurting or whatever? You know what I mean? So
Right.
there's always a rhyme for the reason because
Right.
I know when she's sick because her A-type personality doesn't allow her to hide it if it's legit. But if it's not legit, her A-type personality is very methodical. So
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what I mean? So I'm like, hold on, you're asking this question now, but up until now you didn't look sick. So what do you mean? You know what I mean? So that's, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? You know what I mean? And that's just an example of some of the stuff that I have to, the dynamics I go through as a single father. But at the same time, at 12 years old, I do know that when CPS was showing up to the school 2 months or 3 months ago, because my ex, sent them up there and CPS took her phone, she was assertive enough to say, look, give me back my phone.
Yeah.
That's an assault. You have my phone. You're not supposed to take my phone because she knows the rules of the game. She knows the decorum. So,
Yeah. So like that's like, see, Kelsey has a lot of outside resources. She has her main therapist. She goes see her on-site school. I don't think she's not called a therapist there. She's called something else. I forgot what the name is. She sees her twice a week. So because I even let Kelsey have wellness days. So again, where most of the time where the kids like they play sick, whatever, Kelsey doesn't have to do that with me, because if she says, "Hey, I don't feel good," and like not meaning she's like sick, like it's like I'm having anxiety, like mentally I'm not having the best day. And us as adults, we do that. So just like when days when we be like, I don't feel like going to work, I'm gonna call in or whatever, I just want to lay in the bed. I give her that freedom to do that. So she doesn't even go through the phase of wanting to quote unquote try to manipulate me, because it's like she knows that she honestly
Exactly.
tells me, "Hey, today I want to stay home. I just want to lay down." Okay, cool. Today you can stay home. This is going to be your wellness day. And then we already have an agreement like, hey, if you stay home, you're going to spend your day. She's required to do a certain amount of time of meditation, read, and actually spend time not on like the tablet or wanting to like just watch TV. You actually are going to do wellness activities. So, and she does
And
yoga.
that's the advantage, to the singularity versus the tryout, the trio I have to deal with, because I'm split. And not
Yeah,
only that, I have a braided weave of personalities that are trying to compete with each other for my affection and
yeah,
attention. Whereas your daughter has no one and can be honest with you, whereas my kids don't necessarily. Being honest doesn't necessarily work out to their advantage all the time. So,
yeah.
but yeah, I agree with you. The
So it's like
dynamics
I
are
just want
different.
her, yeah, and we even talk about like her lying. I'm like, most of the time, I'm not gonna get mad at what you did. I'm gonna be mad that you lied to me, because one, that makes me feel like you think I'm stupid and you're disrespecting me. So if you tell me the truth, you're most likely not going to get in trouble. So crazy funny, last week she did something wild. Her teacher sends me a message at 8:30 in the morning, and she's like, "Kelsey gave me this," and she said that the doctor said don't give it to the nurse. Kelsey had created a fake doctor's note to give to her teacher, saying that she couldn't stand for too long. So
At
part of
9 years old,
9, yeah, a part of me wanted to be so angry and upset.
did she write it? She actually wrote it, or she typed
Yes,
it out and printed it?
she printed out an actual like doctor's letterhead and
Holy
filled it
shit!
out and like wrote like in cursive. So
Wow.
when I looked at it, I was confused on the fact that one, the teacher didn't immediately notice that this obviously was not real. So that was a concern. So it's like, so my daughter recognized that she probably thinks you're not as bright, because she knew she can play the game with you. But as soon as you said you're going to give it to the nurse, you said you weren't going to give it to the nurse. So a part of me was upset. And then the other part of me was extremely proud, because it's like, the fact that you did this. And it was like, so I asked her like, why you do this? And she's like, because kids, when they're hurt, they get extra attention, they get to leave class early, all that good stuff. And I'm like, okay. So I scheduled a session with her therapist that night. Like, why do you need attention? And her thing was, I don't get attention from my dad. He's always on his phone. He's always working. I'm always with his girlfriend. So of course, mom, me working through that in therapy consistently, because I always want to do something about that. I can't do anything about it. So we had to explain to her, one, what you did was illegal. I was a little extreme, told her that the doctor said she could sue her because you took her identity and like forged her signature. So I wanted her to realize the true consequences of what she was doing. But also, it's like you also can't get attention from anywhere else. So Kelsey, she knows she can speak this out, because as soon as I picked her up, the first thing she said was, I know what I did was wrong. I'm not going to have recess for the rest of the thing. And then whatever other punishment you want to give me. So she came in there ready for like, okay. So
And
I'm
that's
like,
kind of scary. That's kind of scary too, because that's like CIA ops, like training type stuff, where you're like, I'm a spy. I know what my consequences are. I'll die for my country. Give me what you got. I'm not saying nothing.
so I'm like,
That's crazy.
right. So my thing, what I was telling my mom also, I'm like, okay, we've all done stuff like, I forged a document or two in my life. So I'm just like, it's crazy she did it at 9. I was like, the difference between me and her was, when I did it, I was an adult. Like, I knew the consequences. I knew it was wrong. She did it not knowing the extremities of the other side of that. So I'm like, now that she knows, she's like, okay, I don't want to do that. So the thing is, my lesson to her was, if you're going to do something, understand the consequences of it and be ready to bear those consequences. And that's also why she came to me in the car, because we had that conversation. Kelsey, you can do whatever you want, but understand the consequences. Just like when we were going through the situation where we were battling it out, especially because she was feeling confused with me and her dad going back and forth to court, and then him saying whatever to her. She had said something, I forgot what she said to me, but it was disrespectful. And I told her she can get out. Now, again, yes, she is 9'8", but I also had to make her realize I don't have to do this. So I'm not going to control you, because again, I'm trying to work on my control issues, right? So it's like, if you want to be in control and you want to do this is the consequences of your actions. So just be very clear what you do, because you can't play this game with me. So you want to have attitude in my house, you don't have to be here. So she knows, I preach to her all the time, do what you're going to do. I'm not going to control that. I am going to dictate on a certain level and lead you in the right direction. But do you understand, if you do something, I can't stop you, because we're kids. I done a lot of stuff behind my mom's back. Just understand there are consequences. So don't be surprised. Be ready to get what you deserve. So she's like, okay. Because I'm trying to get over that control thing. It's like, because I realized even growing up, my mom being strict and I thought she was so strict, but then also compared to my cousins, she wasn't that strict. And I'm realizing, they started drinking and having sex way before me. I didn't do any of that until I was 20, 21, for real. So it's like, and it's like my mom gave me like, hey, she was still strict, but it was like, say something, like you need to speak up. So that's how I am with like Kelsey, because I feel like the more you try to prevent your child from doing something and like show them, they're going to get attached to somebody who wants to show them so bad, and they're going to be idiots and put your child in a position that they don't need to be in. So Kelsey, if you're interested in something, let me know. You have questions, let me know. I don't care what it is. I can only get mad at you hiding it from me. I'd rather be the point person for everything she needs to know. When it even comes down to sex, drugs, whatever, let me know, because then I can properly educate you, instead of you going to one of your stupid ass friends who going to lace your stuff with some weird something. Next thing I know, I'm getting called from the hospital because you've been drugged. So
that would be how a mom would think about it. Me as a dad, I'm just like, well, if you have questions, I'll point you in the right resources and I'll tell you who to talk to, but I'm not going to sit there and show you how the interaction happens and all that, especially with my daughters. But yeah.
I mean, that's why she has this is why I purposely put all
Well,
this other
I'll
stuff.
sit them down and have them watch a movie or something that hits hard. You know what I mean? That's my tactic. It's like, do you understand the parody here, or do you see the parallel? You know what I mean? Yeah, Dad.
Yeah, we watch stuff too, but this is also why I have all the people in her life, because I even tell her, like, you don't have to tell me specifically everything. You have trusted adults that I trust who are also going to guide you, because it's like, I feel like it may be some stuff she still may not want to talk to me about, but she can talk to her therapist. She can talk to her school psychologist. Like, you have other adults. She has my mom's number, my grandmother's, my best friend's number in her phone. Like, whatever adult you feel like is appropriate for you to talk to, I know I set her up with that outlet, and it doesn't have to be me. I just need her to have that outlet. So that's the real moral of the story is I give her the space to communicate with whoever it is she needs to communicate with. And I have great people around her who, if I do need to know something, they would tell me. And if I don't need to know and they had the conversation with her, then that's just it. She didn't call my best friend plenty of times without me. And she's like, yeah, Kelsey called me. I'm like, okay, cool. She's like, yeah, it's fine. I'm like, okay, cool.
That's what's up. Well, with that being said, Tyronica, it was definitely a pleasure talking to you. It's been a long time. We haven't been able to catch up.
Yeah.
There's so much more I got to tell you, but I can't tell you on camera as far as like the drama that I'm going through. But with that being said, let me go ahead and wrap this up with you, because it's 9:00, and I got to get these kids ready for school tomorrow. So,
Yes.
but with that being said, it was a pleasure. Thanks again for coming on to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. I'll talk to you later, though.
All right. You have a good night.
You too.